Kurosaki Ichigo, the main protagonist and one-time hair model of the manga and anime series Bleach. This shonen hero has a wealth of incredible power that's as diverse as the characters in the series. Given all that, is it actually possible to put him into your next D&D character sheet? In this video, we're gonna go through the different narrative beats in Ichigo's career and match it with a corresponding D&D Homebrew option, so you can play as your very own version of Kurosaki Ichigo. Hello and thank you for being here, and welcome to My Wife is the MC. I'm DMV and you're watching Husbando Homebrew, a show where we take pop culture to pen and paper. First, let's lay some foundational stuff. Goals and challenges. Now, technically speaking, anything is possible with Homebrew. But to translate the features of shonen powerhouses like Ichigo into your next character sheet without ruining 5E's foundation is what separates good Homebrew from the rest. With that said, I have 3 major goals for this Homebrew. 1, we'll go through Ichigo's journey, and we'll be matching his powers and abilities with a corresponding feature via a Homebrew subclass, feat, or magic item. 2, I want to create enough options that doesn't deviate too far from Ichigo as a character concept, but still allow enough room for customization to be able to represent other Bleach characters like Renji or Rukia. 3, maintain some semblance of balance, specifically to be able to play with 2 or 3 other players and not be a headache for the DM. Good luck. Ultimately, my main overarching goal is to give you and your DM the option to play and run in a Bleach-inspired adventure. Goals, however, come with formidable challenges, and Ichigo is nothing if not challenging. And let me tell ya, it took a lot of time and effort to lay out all his features. First challenge, he is a shonen protagonist with a cheat feature in the form of immense spiritual pressure, or power level, or magical ability, or whatever is equivalent in your setting. Second, his power level throughout his journey is actually a series of peaks and valleys rather than a steady rise to the top. He loses his powers often, but at the same time he gains it back and comes back stronger. And third, he has a very diverse power set that seemingly stack up on top of each other. He has a mask, he has a hollow form, he has a bankai, he has a shikai. They all more or less coalesce into this major powerhouse of bonuses. However, as a disclaimer, I'm only going to be covering Ichigo's time as a Shinigami. I think Fullbring deserves to be its own thing, and narratively, it felt like a gap phase for Ichigo during the second time he lost his powers. Yes, he lost it more than once. Not saying that the Fullbring arc was bad, in fact I liked it quite a bit, though I am saying that I feel it conceptually deviates a bit too far from the Shinigami features, which is what Ichigo more or less majors in. So take a guess, how many goals do you think I can achieve at the end of this video? Let's go find out. Ichigo's backstory. Let's begin with who Ichigo is. We know him as an angsty teenager who can see ghosts. Now, I can certainly use the spirit-sensitive race from the Chad video, but there's kind of a catch here. He almost never fights hollows in his human body. This also hits on the Shinigami in general, being able to fight in spite of having no physical body. Therefore, I created a homebrew race, or species if that's more to your liking, called the Soul Native. This race is close to the Spirit Sensitive, but it differs in the creature type and soul body traits specifically. The former essentially gives the undead type, since souls are more or less ghosts, though lore-wise it's a bit more complicated than that. However, if you find yourself in a physical body, you're technically a humanoid. The soul body trait, on the other hand, is what opens up options for more diverse physical appearances, like that one captain. This ultimately gives you the rules also on how you operate as an incorporeal soul. Well, more or less incorporeal anyway. So both the creature type trait and the soul body trait, it mentions magical means that can put you in a physical body. It sounds a bit vague, but I promise I'll get to that later. One other thing about this race is the free feat and an unarmored defense. Since this one gives you a free feat at first level, we'll go look at the first homebrew feat. I hope you're familiar with the manga, but spoilers abound for Ichigo's ancestry in 3, 2, 1. The first feat we'll get for Ichigo is the Mixed Heritage feat. This is a half ASI feat, and it grants a defensive feature for both saving throws and attacks once per long rest or by using half your hit dice. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This feature of Ichigo's doesn't manifest until way late into the series. However, I think there's enough foreshadowing, but I'm no Bleach expert. While I could have made a mixed heritage as a race, it's unfortunately a little too specific only to Ichigo, which fails in goal number 2. So I compromised a bit by having the Soul Native race, or species, have a feat that can potentially extend into being a half Quincy, or extend to some other feat like the PHB's Magic Initiate if you want to represent someone like Rukia. So that takes care of Ichigo's DNA. Now we go through his narrative beats, starting with Agent of the Shinigami arc. So this is the start of Ichigo's career as a Soul Reaper, when Rukia gave him that spiritual jumpstart. Gotta love these protagonists for getting stabbed for fun. If you're just starting a campaign, I do hope you start at 3rd level because I created a fighter subclass for Ichigo in the form of the Zanjutsu Soul Reaper. This is a fighter archetype and represents the general purpose Shinigami that populates Soul Society. While it doesn't cover the hyper-specialized Shinigami like Zaraki or Byakuya or Yoruichi, this is a good start for a majority of Soul Reapers like Rukia, Renji, and maybe even Ikkaku. If you want me to cover Zaraki or some other character, however, do let me know in the comments. So when Ichigo was starting out, he didn't have a lot of special stuff. He didn't have a very special weapon, nor did he have any special abilities other than boom boom pow super high spiritual pressure. What he did have is a big sword and a lot of Ryatsu. So let's take a look at that big sword with the sealed Zanpakuto feature. So this one gives an Eldritch Knight-like magic weapon. Though it doesn't require attunement, you are the only one that can really take advantage of its properties. This thing slices, it dices, it brings ghosts to the afterlife and purifies the evil hollow. While it's mostly a flavor-related property, I did give it some extra utility by giving it a once per day gentle repose spell. While Ichigo does keep his Zanpakuto as a greatsword, you can disguise it as a walking stick or something else if you want to roleplay as a different Shinigami like, Yamamoto Genryusai. Last property of the feature is its saving throw. It doesn't do much at 3rd level, but it does set up the DC for stuff you get at later levels. So I've mentioned Ichigo's Reiatsu and that he has a lot of it. So let's represent that with the Spiritual Pressure Release feature. Right, so you might find this familiar because this used to be the racial trait of the Spirit-sensitive race back when I first did the Chad character. So I took that trait and turned it into a class feature because I figured it's a bit more in line with the Reiatsu training of the Shinigami. Of course, I updated the Spirit-sensitive race in the document to compensate for this loss and give it something more in line with a Soul Native. So this feature lets you use a pool of dice called Reiatsu dice, and it allows you to do certain things like add to checks like Perception or Intimidation, or reduce damage, or deal additional damage. It's a per rest ability that increases at certain levels in this class. The die expression, which starts at a d6, grows at a rate similar to that of the Brute archetype, if you remember that old Unearthed Arcana back a few years ago. But it did give it a little more utility. Also, it's a limited use feature. There is one aspect of this part of Ichigo's early career that's missing, and that is his double life. If you recall the early days of Bleach, Ichigo had to constantly find ways to 1. Get out of class, and 2. Get his soul out of his body. Remember when I mentioned a few minutes ago about Soul Native's creature type and soul body trait switching between undead or humanoid? Here are some of the magical ways that I referenced a while ago to get out of said physical body. First is the Soul Seizing Glove, which is a magic item that a friendly NPC or party member can use to push your soul out of your body, in a friendly way. The interesting thing about this is that the Feign Death spell is cast on your soulless husk while you're out and about bleaching. I added that in, if only to differentiate it from the other methods of soul separation. Also, I think it's kinda cool that way. The second way is the Artificial Soul, which is a little bit easier since this item can put your body into autopilot, unless the Artificial Soul is defective or has a bit of a personality problem. In that case, I leave that to the capable hands of your DMs. Well, not to screw with you, of course, why would they do that? So far, we've covered Ichigo's race/species and his early career as a Shinigami, and also a few ways where he can leave his physical form to go out and about. But we all know that at the end of the first arc, something happens that shakes up the story. Soul Society arc. Ichigo gets cut down and is severed from his powers, and his close ally and mentor is taken to Soul Society. This of course led to our 15-year-old protagonist to seek out a shady store owner, where said shady store owner took a minor to his basement, chained him up, and gave him a power boost. Yeah. This training arc / potential lawsuit fast tracks Ichigo to reach his Zanpakuto's Shikai form. What does this mean for your character sheet? Well, let me show you the archetype's 7th level feature, Zanpakuto Release. This lets you use a bonus action to transform your weapon into its Shikai state, expending 3 Reiatsu die in the process and rolling it to determine its duration. This state gives a +1 bonus to attacks and damage rolls, or +2 when you reach higher levels, specifically 15th. I designed it in that way because the subclass is reliant on a specific weapon, so this one compensates for the fact that other magic weapons will likely fall by the wayside. Bonuses aside, this also lets you finally choose your Zanpakuto. In Bleach, these weapons brought a lot of personality to an otherwise homogeneous fighting force, and seeing the various releases and abilities appealed to me quite a bit back in the day. The designs were pretty good too. In the document's current version, you can choose from 3 Zanpakuto options. For the purposes of this video, however, we're going to take the Slaying Moon. It's a simple Zanpakuto compared to the other options, and that pretty much matches Ichigo's Zangetsu. It's simple, gets the job done, and can take in Ichigo's massive Reiatsu. Compared to the other Zanpakuto, this weapon is in a permanent Shikai state, so it always has the bonuses to attack and damage rolls, and it also adds a cool 1d8 to any Reiatsu die you roll. Of course, the main draw of this Zanpakuto is... Yes, as an action, you can unleash Ichigo's signature move that clips several creatures in a 30-foot line. Of course, this contrasts with the fighter's very many extra attacks, but it's great for dealing damage to a large number of creatures and gives you a small ranged option. I feel like this covers everything that Ichigo gained at this point in his career, but I feel like I'm forgetting something. I'm sure it's nothing special. Ichigo does get his Shikai, and then he cuts a swath of fallen Shinigami across Soul Society. He does hit a wall in the form of the very cold and very flowery Kuchiki Byakuya. This means it's another training arc care of series best girl, Yoruichi. Ichigo goes through quite a bit, including a bit of building spelunking and a lot of fighting, but the ultimate goal of Yoruichi's crash training is to get him to reach his Bankai state. By the time Ichigo returns to his mission, he's gotten quite a bit stronger. First is he starts to kick all kinds of A, and then he goes into a bit of martial arts shenanigans. This leads us to our 10th level feature, Soul Reaper Discipline. This is intended to give you certain dips in Shinigami specializations without having to multi-class. One for an unarmed fighting style, and one for flash steps, and one for Kido, or spellcasting. But there is a problem here. Ichigo has shown to be capable of both Hakuda and Ho-Ho or Flash Step, thanks to Yoruichi's expertise. The likely build then is the Fighting Initiate feat from Tasha's at 8th level to get the unarmed fighting style, and then take the Ho-Ho option at 10th level to get your Flash Step on. Byakuya and Ichigo eventually have their deathmatch, and this is where Ichigo reveals a new height of power. Bankai! Yes, at 15th level you get Final Release. This is quite similar to the Zanpakuto release, except you take an action to transform into this state. The bonus is also one notch higher than the Shikai state. The most important part of this feature is gaining access to your chosen Zanpakuto's Bankai state property. And for Slaying Moon, I designed it such that you get to live all your Tensa Zangetsu fantasies. Hopefully. This grants a Reiatsu die bonus, a buffed up Heaven Piercer, and the best part, you gain the benefits of the Haste spell. You might be wondering why it takes so long to hit Bankai, and you'd be right. In fact, the same could be said for the Shikai state hitting at 7th level. if only because majority of features that require selection of other kinds of options typically hit as early as 3rd level. But I designed it this way because while Ichigo had a really fast track in terms of growth, any regular Shinigami takes decades to learn Shikai and at least a century to unlock Bankai. And even then, only the ones with potential to become captain can attain this level of power anyway. And for Ichigo, to match up against one of Soul Society's most feared and respected captains, I think 15th level is just right. Heck, I might even be lowballing it. We have a Shikai, we have a specialization dip, we have a Bankai. Still think I'm forgetting something. Hollowification. The one ordeal in Ichigo's life that would come to define his best and worst moments. So this one can be taken as early as 8th level, and I set it as such because that was around the time he got his Shikai form, and I figured it's a good level to put it. Now, feats aren't really that lengthy in terms of feature descriptions, I mean look at this beast. But I had to establish the rules surrounding your inner chaos breaking through the surface and taking control of your body. This one pops up when you fail a death saving throw, similar to how Ichigo's inner hollow or hollow mask manifests during times of imminent demise. It's admittedly very Deus Ex-y, but I created it to cover that narrative beat. To somewhat balance this out, I made sure to put in an element of risk by putting a countdown on this hollowified state. The longer this creature stays in control, the longer you lose yourself, as it literally eats away at your sense of self until there's nothing left to fight back. Ultimately, passing the whiz save early is the best way to get out of this jam, since it gets harder and harder the longer the inner hollow stays in control. If the whiz saves aren't working, hopefully someone knocks you out of it, because that's the next best thing to regain control. Now you might argue that this should be a charisma save, and you'd be right. But I wanted to represent this battle for control as the inner hollow's charisma rather than yours, and it's trying to overtake your identity, your sense of self, your wisdom score. We know what happens next. Ichigo wins over his inner hollow and ultimately claims victory over Byakuya. And then Aizen happens.
Kurosaki Ichigo. 元気にしていたかね。アイゼン。
Arrancar arc. Some time passes since Rukia's rescue and Ichigo has been recognized as a substitute's Shinigami. He even gets a swanky badge for it. The substitute's badge is another item that lets you get out of your body on the fly. Of course, that leaves your actual physical body vulnerable, but when you gotta go, you gotta go. This also alerts you of any hollow that appear within a 1 mile radius. At this point, a new threat has come in the form of the Arrancar. Hollow with Shinigami powers, and they hit hard. Fortunately for Ichigo, he found some group of former Shinigami who were exiled for having hollow-like powers, just like him. Having trained with them for some time, he learned to harness the power of his inner hollow without letting it take control. So when you reach 16th level, you can take the Vizord feat. It's got a high level requirement and does need a hollowification feat, but ultimately it's a half ASI increase and grants you a temporary power boost for a few rounds in the form of a speed boost, extra force damage per hit, and having a higher average on your Ryatsu die. Much like my reasoning for the hollowification, the Visor powers are charisma based. While this would contrast with the Soul Reaper subclass's wisdom-based features, I ultimately decided to keep it that way to help a bit with the balancing, since that means going a bit MAD on your attributes and to ensure your selection of feats as a fighter has a lot of choices involved. Ichigo's power levels improve marginally over the next few arcs, including the one where he has to rescue Orihime in Kwaikomondo. I would like to point out, however, that his fight with Ulquiorra really put him through the ringer, as he had to use his Bankai, his Vizord mask, and even went full hollow just to eke out a win. I wager hard fights in your game would also force you to pull out all the stops, especially if you're fighting alone. Speaking of fighting alone, we're about to head to one of the more epic one-on-one duels in the series in Fake Karakura Town Arc. Ichigo has little time to rest and had to chase after Aizen, who at this point had become an existential threat. While he can put up a decent fight against his two captains and maybe the Arrancar, he is woefully outmatched against the Hogyoku-powered megalomaniac. So his dad intervenes. The former captain, donning his old haori on top of a familiar black gi and hakama, had to take him to a space where time was a little less fluid, where he trains. Yup, another training arc. It's not a Bleach problem really, it's a shonen thing, and I like it for what it is. Here he gains a few levels until he attained the ultimate yet forbidden power, Forbidden Release Master. This is a feat that has a 19th level fighter requirement. And yes, I am aware that the subclass capstone hits at 18th level, but I promise I'll get to that later. I just figured that a feat like this would have a really high level requirement, which is basically just a notch below the level 20 capstone, and I'll tell you why. First, this is what allowed Ichigo to solo an Eldritch God. It's a special Bankai state that gives all manner of buffs and bonuses, but most importantly is the last benefit. A special attack that breaks the target's attunement to all of its precious magic items and artifacts. Sure, the anime really plays up Ichigo's power, but I ultimately feel that separating Aizen from the Hogyoku is the key to winning against them. Well, that and a butt ton of damage. This super state lasts for a few minutes or until you use the special attack twice, but after that, your power is a god. This is actually quite a bit similar to how I designed the Sanrei glove back in the Ishida video. Check it out after watching this one if you haven't seen it yet. Ultimately, this leaves Ichigo more or less powerless for the entirety of the time skip. However, he does get his powers back after the Fullbring arc, which I will maybe cover in a different video in the future. Let me know. After that, however, we hit the final arc of Bleach, the 1000-year Blood War arc. I know the new anime is ongoing, so take this as your spoiler warning. I will at least try and keep things vague, but ultimately there will be spoilers abound. This is the arc where the long dormant conflict between the Quincy and the Shinigami finally resurface. Vandenreich specifically takes the once destroyed clan back to prominence. The battles here are rife with betrayals, death, and a lot of loss. Ichigo himself was not immune to said loss, and in the intensity of it all, he ultimately loses Zangetsu. However, with loss comes opportunity, as he ultimately had the chance to forge his blade anew. At 18th level, you get the Zanpakuto Mastery feature. This is the subclass capstone, and by default it lowers the cost of entering your Shikai or Bankai state, and then opens you up to one of two options. A defensive temp HP option for more general use, or the more offense-oriented reforging option that allows you to change your Zanpakuto or take a reforged Zanpakuto along with a nice damage boost. Of course, Ichigo would have chosen the second option and reforged his Zangetsu into its ultimate form. Now, comparing this to the original Slaying Moon, not much has changed other than it being a two-weapon style Zanpakuto. It does come with an increase in damage in the form of a higher die expression and an increase in the range of the Heaven Piercer action. While this is the subclass capstone, this isn't the end of Ichigo's growth. The Forbidden Release Master feat is a fleeting one, and it ultimately forces you to change it once you get your powers back. So in preparation for his final battle against Yuhavak, he learned to leverage on his many powers that vie for dominance in his soul. When you reach 19th level again after getting your powers back from using Forbidden Release, you can instead take the Power Coalescence feat. Similar to Forbidden Release, this one rides on your Bankai state and grants you several benefits. The one big benefit that matters, however, is you getting the benefits of Tensor's transformation. And this is where Ichigo's power caps off, as far as we know. At least until Kubo releases the Hell Arc or something. Hopefully with all of this in your character sheet, you can face off against your table's version of Yuhavak and emerge victorious. I did it! Right? I covered Ichigo! I covered mostly everything! Okay, let me take a breath and check back with our goals. Was I able to go through Ichigo's journey and match his powers and abilities with a corresponding feature? I like to think so, yeah. Well, full bring aside, I think we covered more or less everything. Was I able to create enough builds to represent other Shinigami? Yes, though the list of Zanpakuto will need to be expanded upon to accommodate other Soul Reapers. Lastly, was I able to maintain some sense of balance? Yeah, I'll leave that one to you. At the very least, we now have a framework for a subclass that can fit other characters like Rukia or Renji. So, do let me know in the comments which Bleach character you want me to do next. I've also got ideas for a barbarian class, the likes of Kenpachi, or a Kido-based wizard class for maybe Byakuya, maybe even a paladin for Unohana. I think that one's interesting. You can find the updated document for the Bleach homebrew over here at bit.ly/Husbando_Ichigo, or you can just check out the QR code you can see on the screen right now. It contains all of the Bleach homebrew that I've designed so far, including a few items that I haven't discussed in any of the videos. If you've gotten this far in the video and you like the content, first of all, thank you. I really invite you to subscribe to this channel. You'll find a bunch of subclasses, magic items, and even entirely new systems based on popular franchises like Devil May Cry or Elden Ring, all designed using D&D 5e as the framework. Your subscription is one of the best ways to support us, along with engaging in the content and donating to the Ko-Fi page. Remember to leave a like if you found this video entertaining, and do share this with your twin sisters. For now, we'll leave you with this video of another orange-haired hero from Demon Slayer. And before you go, we just wanted to say thank you for being with us for the entire year. The channel grew quite a bit thanks to you, and we hope that you enjoyed our homebrew content or even the old Gundam campaign. And we hope you stick around for the coming year because we have quite a bit lined up. If our content brightened your day for a bit or inspired you in any way, we'd love to hear about it. It really makes the work worth all the effort. Anyway, thanks for watching, Happy New Year, and my wife and I hope you have a great year ahead.